Hello strangers out there, another video day. This is another in the I Remember series. This is going to be about the time in Germany. In 1981, from October 31st, of 1981 to December, almost Christmas of 1982, I lived in Germany. I was 8 and then 9 the following year, 1982, while I was there. 3rd grade most of that time. And then 4th grade coming up through the other half. And my dad, the reason I was in Germany, my dad was in the military. And he was a radar tech, and he got stationed there, and he'd actually gone during the summer, and we followed. My mother, my brother, and I followed in October. We went up to Michigan to visit family, drove down to South Carolina to pick up a flight, and flew overnight to Germany and landed in Frankfurt in the early morning hours on October 31st. And my dad picked us up at Frankfurt and drove us the 2.5 hours from Frankfurt down to our place in Germany, which is known as Baumholder. Baumholder. Now, Baumholder is a tiny little village completely surrounded by military. So the little German town surrounded by Americans. So that's kind of fun. And you can always tell when you're actually when you reach Baumholder, because the roads were set for American cars around the base, and when you actually get into the town, they narrowed significantly to the point where you could really only fit one car down these roads, and the cars would go in both directions, which made navigating through there really fun. So we got to Baumholder and had just enough time to get some costumes real quick, and then meet some of the neighbor kids, and then go trick-or-treating a little, towards the afternoon and early evening. And when we were done trick-or-treating, we actually went out to the little town of Baumholder, into a little German restaurant there, and I was introduced to a lovely dinner item called Jaeger Schnitzel, which, for those of you who do not know, Jaeger Schnitzel is veal, I believe, which is covered in a mushroom sauce. Oh, it's so good. Oh, and unfortunately, I haven't had it all too often. But now, being the fact that it's a military installation, military bases, we were basically living as Americans in an American environment. It just happened to be right in the middle of Germany, and Baumholder is nestled up in the hills. You're probably more familiar with the larger installation, more famous installation of Ramstein Air Base. Well, Baumholder's a little north of that, so up in the hills north of that. So, and we were in, Baumholder's nestled in a little valley, and they built all the way, like I said, all the way around it was military base. And then up in the hills were living quarters that the French built, because that was after World War II. The French controlled that particular part of Germany at the time. And then the Americans took it over later. And this is 1981, 82, so we're still in the middle of the whole Cold War thing. So there is definitely there's still a divide between East and West Germany at this time. And so, American presence is very heavy in Germany at that time. This is, the beginning of the Reagan years, too. So, So we were there, and like I said, the quarters were up on the hills and stuff, and the Americans had two elementary schools, one on each hill. Basically, there's two main neighborhoods, and there was elementary schools in each neighborhood, and each was atop its own hill. And then there was, I believe, just one high school, kind of junior high school, from, 7th grade on up to 12th grade. It was all in one school. And that was actually on our hill, the hill that I lived on. And so I went to school. As soon as they could get me enrolled, which was just a few days later, unfortunately. I went to school, and it was a normal school. It was an American school. They had a German class, so a little pull-out thing, so you go take German, much as some schools might used to maybe do French or something, or Spanish. You could have this little Spanish class for the elementary kids. If you live down near the Spanish border, Mexican border here in America. So we had those. And life was pretty normal, and that was the whole idea. To make life, especially for the kids that got dragged along, to make it very normal for us, so that there was no interruption in our school thing. My dad actually wanted to live in the town, in the village itself, and send my brother and I, well, me mainly, because my brother hadn't started school yet. He would the following, when I hit 4th grade, Jim started kindergarten. But he wanted to send us to the German school that was in the village. But the military wouldn't allow him to live what they call on the economy. Wouldn't allow him to live there. He had to get quarters up on the hill. And so there we were. And near the school, and kind of between the elementary school and the high school, there was a little convenience shop. Very much in the sense of, what one might think of like a 7-Eleven or something like that. Just a really small shop. They didn't sell gas there. It was just a little, store to go to, and you could just pick up basics. If you needed anything more, you had to drive down the hill, through the town, through the base to get to the commissary. But if you just wanted to get, some real quick things, and most importantly, snacks, you can go to this little convenience store. And I was very quickly introduced to two things that were exclusive to Germany. And here's one of them. Gummy Bears. Particularly the Haribo brand. These were what was available in that shop. And the other one was what's known in America now as the Capri Sun juice drinks. Those weren't in America at the time. They actually didn't get to America for another 2 years or so later. But while we were in Germany, this was my go-to snack food. These gummy bears. So I'll put them off to the side there so you can see. So, there's all sorts of gummy, when these things hit America, people went nuts for them. And of course, there's all sorts of brands out there now. But the Haribo brand was the kind I was, introduced to. And they have remained my favorite all that time. And I've got another package here. I like the Gummy Bears, and here's the other one. Little twin cherry things. I'm also a big fan of their little cola bottles thing, which I didn't get. I just went out to the store and got these. And I lived on those things. So it was during the time that we were in Germany, that was my go-to snack food. The Haribo either the Gummy Bears, the bottles, or these twin cherries. And I usually, changed it, and my brother was the same way. We usually went through any number of those. And those were usually our three go-tos of all the things that Haribo made back then. And then the Capri Sun juice drinks. those were our go-to, and they were, in a sense, a godsend to my mother. Outside of the fact that we had to pay for them, probably a bit more than what would normally do, and it was just a pretty interesting time. But I've got more stories on Germany later, and I just wanted to make this kind of a fast thing and talk about these. So, and one more story. When we got back, we brought a few of these things with us, and my cousin lived up in Michigan. We left Germany. We left Germany in about mid-December, and went immediately to spend Christmas with our family in Michigan, and then continued back down to our house that we had in Oklahoma at the time. And my cousin worked for Goodyear, and he took a look at those gummy bears and made mention of the fact that that was something that the Goodyear plant probably made. So the little rubbery candies. So that was my cousin Rick. So late cousin Rick, unfortunately. He was quite the character. So he loved making jokes like that. So I'm going to close this out here, and we'll tell more stories about Germany and other things that I remember later on. Until then, stay strange. We'll see you later. Bye.